First, we need to talk about the Australian-American alliance, forged by John Curtin in the fires of war in the Pacific, cemented by Menzies, and now being undone by Anthony Albanese. Once upon a time, the idea of bad diplomatic blood between America and Australia was such a ludicrous idea that it became a foil for comedy.
Unfortunately, Bart, your little escapade could not have come at a worse time. Americo-Australian relations are at an all-time low.
But now, no longer. For what are largely domestic political reasons, picking up on polling showing that Donald Trump is on the nose with a lot of Australians, particularly Labour voters, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has seen fit to suggest a realignment of our foreign policy, breaking away from the U.S. in the name of national sovereignty, while following the lead of Europe on issues like Palestinian recognition, and at the same time cozying up to China, where the PM spent 6 whole days recently. Now, all of this has led to the bizarre, what was the point of that trip made by Defense Minister Richard Marles to Washington this week? On Wednesday, Marles posted happy snaps of himself and Ambassador Kevin Rudd meeting with a somewhat bemused Vice President JD Vance and American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Marles, or Marles's office, tweeted, quote, "The alliance between Australia and the United States is long-standing, built on our shared history of deep collaboration. I was pleased to have the opportunity to reaffirm Australia's commitment to building on this partnership with U.S. Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in Washington, D.C. today," unquote. Well, it seemed like things were all coming together, and Marles, who is a member of Labour's right, and who, I think, to be fair, generally gets it on security issues, unlike some of the absolutely undergraduate bomb throwers he shares a cabinet room with, well, I think Marles was starting to think that he could patch things up. But then there was this headline. Pentagon denies Richard Marles had a meeting with Pete Hegseth, and that was attached to an article which described what happened between the two men as a, quote, happenstance encounter. Whoa, what's going on here? What was the point of the trip then if Marles was presumably, I don't know, what was he going to do? Get a day pass to the executive office building or the White House and wander around and hope to run into some big shots? Then the Pentagon put out another statement, and here I feel like this might have been a little goodwill gesture on the part of the Americans to help the Aussies save face. They said that Secretary Hegseth welcomed the opportunity to meet with Marles, and that meeting had been planned in advance. Yet now the latest version of the story has come out. This is actually a secret mission to meet not with Hegseth, but JD Vance in advance of a potential Trump-Albanese meeting. But amazingly, the Australian has reported that despite the news story that this was all about meeting JD Vance, and I have to ask, why would there be secrecy around that? In fact, no meeting had been set between Marles and Pete Hegseth. According to the Australian, quote, while the Washington trip was promoted by Mr. Marles prior to his departure from Washington as another opportunity to discuss shared defense and security matters with Mr. Hegseth, no meeting had been locked in with the U.S. Defense Secretary by the time he touched down. Seriously? This is frankly very weird. I mean, these sorts of trips are generally very tightly planned, and the notion that our defense minister's office hadn't locked something in with Hegseth even while he was still in the air, and while Marles reportedly said he'd increase Australian defense spending, well, there are plenty of others I'd love to see raised here. Like, for example, free speech. I wonder if JD Vance knows about our e-safety commissioner's antics. Look, the Australian-American alliance is long-standing and vitally important, but frankly, this government, this Labour government, has, for very cynical and political reasons, decided to throw shade on it, while pivoting, as I say, not just to Europe, but also to China. It's a bad look, it's dangerous, and I hope Marles has the ability to put a stop to it.